Hey yo, this is a second video in my rambling series. If you watch the video, thanks for clicking and viewing all of that jazz. But for now, I'm going to get into why I miss the Steam Greenlight program. Not sure if most people even remember what Greenlight was, but I'm going to kind of preface the video by defining Greenlight. It was a program built into the Steam store page that allowed the community to vote on which games made it into Steam. If there was an indie game being published or maybe not a double A studio, but like, smaller studios or an independent developer would publish a game on Steam, it would go to Greenlight first. And then when it was in Greenlight, the community would vote in the games, and then Valve would pick the top percentage of games that were in high demand by the community. And it was a very beneficial relationship between the developers, Valve, and the players, the consumer party. So all three parties were in a very synergistic ecosystem, which is extremely difficult to do, to have three parties to agree on something to begin with, but then to have three parties not only agree, but all benefit from a program at once is genius. Very rarely in the world does something like that happen. And with the Greenlight program, Valve didn't have their storefront and their servers slammed with thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of shovelware games. And the developers benefited from it because, hey, you were a smaller studio, you can be on Steam now, right? Wow, the community really likes my game. As a developer, if you made a game, the community liked it enough, it would make it to Steam, which was a big accomplishment back then. It was a barrier to entry. It was a mutually beneficial filter, you could say. And the Greenlight program did a lot of great things for Steam, and the only downside is that smaller studios had a harder time getting their stuff on Steam, which, from the perspective of the consumer and Valve, that's a good thing, but from the developer standpoint, that's a bad thing, right? You obviously want your game to be on the platform to make money, to financially support yourself in further development, right? But it solved a lot of problems. And I remember back on Steam, 2014, whenever, 2015, I can't remember when they got rid of it, but I do remember that shovelware on Steam basically didn't exist. There were only a small handful of shovelware titles, if you'd call them that, and they were ironically passed through humor on the Greenlight program. So the program was taken advantage of to look like the most meme-worthy or the games with the most comedic effect that were hot garbage. Everybody knew they were hot garbage, but they wanted them on Steam anyway for the shits and giggles, which there's nothing really wrong with that. But outside of that type of shovelware, the ironic type of things that pass through the filter, we didn't have this problem where you'd be on the Steam store page going through your recommended game queue, and 80 something percent of the games are just junk. They're all early access games that you and I damn well know will never leave early access. There are a lot of bait and switch titles, and then there's the issue of thousands of porn games being uploaded to Steam. Now some of them are funny, right? Like there are funny ones. Not really gonna get into the details on that, but like some of those were passed for shits and giggles. I understand. And I understand there are gooners in the world, don't get me wrong. There definitely are some absolute gooners, some goblins in their basement straight cranking their shit 9,000 RPM, trying to bust every second of every day. Those guys exist, I'm not denying that. But this is more about the quality of the game selection pool on Steam, right? And when you have thousands of porn games on Steam flooding the market, flooding the algorithms, even if you don't own one of these games, they're perpetually what's it called, recommended, these titles. And Yeah, of course, you can disable that. I'm happy they did add that feature to disable the games of this category, but that doesn't really that's not really like a universal fix, right? That's like a personal, okay, I have to go manually do quality control, which is something Valve used to do on their own or in a hands-off approach through the Greenlight program, right? Kind of a weird implementation they've done there. And another reason why I like the Greenlight program is because the market wasn't as saturated as it is today. And by the market I mean video games. The games on Steam were far fewer than they were today. Like if there were, yeah, I don't know, a million games on Steam today. These are not real numbers. This is a hypothetical point. But if there are like 10,000 games on Steam today, with the Greenlight program, there would probably only be like 3,500 games. But they would be games of a higher caliber. They would be more quality games, more finished games, games that were in demand, games people actually wanted to play, right? And there did exist like the slop titles. There were games that were just totally junk. The developers did a bait and switch. There were also games that were good and the developers did bait and switches on. That's more of a problem with early access than it does represent Greenlight, and there will be a video on early access, believe me. That might be my next one. I'm not sure. But all of this builds up until Valve announced that they're discontinuing Steam Greenlight, right? And with the fall of Greenlight, I know it's about 10 years later, we now have what is known as friend slot, which there might be a video on that too later. I don't know. But, all these friend slot titles, they're not really great games. They're not good experiences. They don't have interesting mechanics. They are social soft. They're like a program, a software that allows social interaction more than it does interaction with the player in the game itself. And kind of what I mean by that is they're all kind of like co-op junk for the sake of being co-op junk first and video games second. The social factor of these games is prioritized above all other factors in the games. I mean, graphics, interactability, none of them have really a good story, if a story at all. And ultimately, they're not really games at that point. Most of them are these bullshit copy and paste Unity asset games that do use the free assets from Unity, like unashamed copy paste, drag and drop like it's Roblox Studio or some shit, right? And there aren't interesting mechanics, there's no good lore behind them. With Greenlight, there would be far fewer slop titles, not only with friend slop, but universally across the board. Back in the day, like way back in time, talking PS2, PS3 era of consoles, the co-op games were games first, and they were social co-op features added as a bonus feature. They weren't revolving around, hey guys, this is a game you can play with your friends. It was revolving around, hey guys, here's an awesome game on its own, but you can also play it with friends. Have you ever tried to play one of these friend slot games on your own with none of your friends? They suck. They're substanceless. There's no depth to any of it. They're actually garbage. And back to my point, if you think about how perfect the Lego Star Wars games were, Donkey Kong Country and like the first 8 Mario Kart games, they were awesome games first and foremost, and optionally co-op experiences second. And I think with if there was a return to Greenlight, the Valve Steam, game buying and algorithmic selection process would be much better. I don't Valve kind of took the genie out of the bottle. I don't think you're going to be able to put the toothpaste back in the tube in this scenario. But it's not it's something to think about. It is something to think about. Yeah, I'm gonna call it there. If you made it here, thanks for watching. Yeah, more to come.